Well, we are here today for our men's preview for Indian Wells 2021. Brett Phillips and Courtney Walsh joining you, of course, here at the First Serve. We are in Melbourne, Australia. We'd love to be on the ground at Indian Wells, but travelling difficulties and quarantining in Australia makes it a very tough assignment at the moment. But nonetheless, we are covering it here right across all our channels at the First Serve. Walshy, the qualifying is complete. We might start there first from an Australian perspective, like we started with Astra Sharma yesterday. Alex Burkich, terrific. We did speak to him on the First Serve about midway through this year to tell a bit about his story, going down college path and coming on the tour a little bit later. Hasn't played, as many sort of ITFs and challenges as a lot of the players who stepped out younger on the pro tour. But he's made some great headway to get towards about 200 in the world, which we know can be an area that you can sit around for quite some time. But yeah, terrific for him today to qualify for his first Masters 1000.
Yeah, fantastic to get through against Frantangelo in straight sets. And you talked about his story. I remember having a discussion with him just before the Australian Open, where he had that opportunity to play in Melbourne. He did the training camp in Sydney, but there was as to whether or not he could actually get down to Melbourne, there were some concerns. He get to go via Gosford to make it to an Australian Open, which was sort of quite the sign of the times. He's had an interesting year. He's sort of been back and forward. You sort of thought he might make a big breakthrough on the ATP Tour. Hasn't quite done that, but he's had, he's been able to play. I think he carried an injury for a little while as well, but he's still had a pretty sound year. Hasn't lost any ground, and let's hope this is a chance for him to really go forward. Clearly used to playing in the States, given his college background. It'd be lovely to see him do well in a Masters event.
Yeah, he's done a lot of his work off Broadway, so playing the Challenger circuit, and he's got a decent serve. He's big off the ground. I think the one chance this year on the tour that we got to sort of see him on a bigger stage was when he played Shapovalov at Queen's, and actually played a really competitive match against Dennis, was able to hold his serve for a fair majority of that match. So, yeah, he's got Pablo Anderson, the veteran Spaniard, who we know has come back the last year or two. He's had all sorts of injuries across the journey. He's come back in a pretty good way. In fact, he's played some terrific matches. He's beaten Roger Federer this year. And, yeah, that's a tough match.
It absolutely is, but it also, I think, opens an opportunity. Just having a look at my notes. I think the winner would play Alex de Minaur in the second round based on that, which, it could be great to see an Australian versus an Australian. Andy Jar, as you said, is a very accomplished, classy veteran. Good wins. But it's always hard playing in the desert first up against someone who's played qualifying matches already and is used to the surface, but also we know that the air's a bit thinner, so the balls fly a little bit more in Indian Wells. So it's a good chance for him. But speaking of Australians, I actually don't mind that section of the draw for Alex de Minaur, who we know has had a real run of outs with since Wimbledon. Struggled to find his best form after contracting COVID-19. So having a look at that section, I thought it was a little chance for Alex to hopefully regain some form and make a run here.
Yeah, that'd be nice. He's got some points, as we mentioned on the First Serve, our radio show on Monday night. I mean, this is a huge period, isn't it, for de Minaur, who could maybe potentially slip down to around 40, 45. He's got some points to defend in this last bit of the year, and Duckworth is rising. And we'll talk about James in a moment and his opportunity here at Indian Wells. But, yeah, Alex, looking for a strong back end to the year before he gets to Australia.
No doubt about that. And he has tended to play well in the back end of the year in the past. We have seen him perform very well, hence the points to defend. It wasn't that long ago, 2 or 3 seasons, where he played Tsitsipas in the next-gen finals. And there was a couple of really good matches there. Clearly capable. I mean, it's just the confidence is just not quite there at the moment. So close in the last fortnight in matches against Giron and edged in both. And you would love to see him just get that confidence-boosting win to go forward because, as I said, he's clearly good enough. I know that COVID knocked him around a little bit, knocked him from training. And then as a player, you need to be feeling absolutely 100% confident in yourself and in what you do on the court to succeed. And he clearly didn't quite have that going into the US summer.
No, exactly right. So fingers crossed he can just get his game going, get his mojo. It's tough. Men's tennis, extremely competitive. He knows what's ahead of him, which is a tough bracket to break into. The ones coming from below him, Ariga, they're stepping up on the tour, so the level of competition is extremely high. So let's round out the other Australians we've touched on. So Burkich, Demonor, potential matchup there. The other Aussies, I'll just get a quick comment on Walshy. So Millman to play Jack Sock. That'll be a first meeting between that pair. So John's gone from Kazakhstan to Bulgaria to Indian Wells. We spoke to him a couple of weeks ago in Kazakhstan, and he said, ideally, it's not probably the long road trip you want to be making at this time of the year. Now, everyone loves Indian Wells, but I know I've spoken to John Millman a couple of times who doesn't necessarily have it as his absolute favourite tournament, and he's had a few things to say about that in the past. But Jack Sock, Millman, how do you see that matchup?
Well, and we've seen Jack performing really well since he's come back to the tour after really dipping down to unranked status, which for a player of his caliber, a top 10 player in the past, just an outstanding doubles player as well. It was difficult to see. So to see him back playing exceptionally well is good for the tour.
Yep.
Maybe not so good for Millman. The one thing is that I think Millman, firepower-wise, you think Sock's got the bigger forehand, bigger game. Millman can make him play a lot of balls. And I know Jordan Thompson has had success against Jack Sock in the past at the US Open and in Davis Cup by making him play lots and lots of balls. So let's hope Millman is able to do that. I think the winner of that would go on to play Sinner, the winner in Sofia last week, I think, in the second round. So certainly no easy matches there. I'm interested to see what it is about Indian Wells that John has touched on. I know, as I said, I know the balls fly a little bit more. It may not suit him quite as much, given his style of play. More the attrition than the free flowing.
Yeah, I remember him speaking certainly conditions, but also just some of the bits and pieces around the tournament itself. I'd have to drill down a little more specifically, but I know he hasn't always been maybe the biggest fan of Indian Wells as a tournament, which is probably rare amongst the playing group. The other Aussies, Jordan Thompson's got Kevin Anderson. Now, I remember sitting in Miami courtside a couple of years ago when these two played each other, and I sat right down in the photographer's pit there, and you got a real feel for Tomo that tournament. He'd already knocked off, I think, Dimitrov, and I'm just trying to think of the other player he knocked off. So he'd set up a really big opportunity in the third round. The weight of ball of Anderson was just a little heavier than those two opponents previous. But, gee, he was right in that match, losing 7-5, 7-5. 2 years on, we know Anderson has had a fair dip from where he was at that particular stage, and Tomo's having one of those years where he's sort of thereabouts. He's had some good moments, but he's had some weeks where it just hasn't quite fired. But you look at this on paper, and there's an opportunity here.
There absolutely is. I mean, if you pick him on form, you're probably picking Thompson. On reputation, clearly Anderson, given dual Grand Slam finalist and, again, performs well on the US hard courts. But he has struggled since he's returned to the tour after injury. He's in his mid-30s now, Kevin. So it's going to be harder for him. Clearly, a serve and return type scenario here. If Jordan can return well and get on top of Anderson's serve, every chance. But it's not going to be easy if Anderson plays to his best.
And the winner to play Sonigo, the Italian, who's, of course, won a title this year. So Thompson, a huge chance there against Kevin Anderson. We'd like to see Tomo finish the season off strongly. James Duckworth, he's had a terrific period. We've been singing his praises. He's the number 2 ranked Australian now. Who knows by year end if he keeps going on the upward trajectory and Alex Demonor maybe doesn't quite find his groove in this back part. Who knows where that ranking comparison might sit. He's got Mackenzie McDonald, who, like Duckworth, has had his share of injuries across his career, come from the college system. I remember that great 5-set match he played against Dimitrov at the Australian Open a few years ago. And he's a guy that, has been 60 in the world. So he's been where sort of Duckworth is. Gee, this is a tough one to split, isn't it? But James has certainly got the form right now.
Look, he is. I mean, it's fantastic to see him getting a proper run at it, an injury-free run. I know I spoke to him in near Southampton a couple of weeks ago, and he said he still had a few niggles, obviously, which you'll get. Most players will have that playing week in, week out. But great to see him having a great, up to a career high. I think if he has a decent performance here, he'll be inside the top 50, which would be wonderful. You touch on Alex Demonor and the points he has to defend. It'd be amazing to see, whatever the scenario is, but Duckworth at number 1 in the country and not in the Davis Cup team in a few weeks. That's a surprising one. But really encouraging, I thought, his form, making that final in Southampton, where he wasn't disgraced. He was a couple of points away from claiming that first set, and then backing it up by making a quarterfinal run in in Sofia last week. I'd love to see him get past McDonald. It's not an easy match, but I think he's playing well enough to do so, provided he's handled the travel, because I think that would give him a second-round clash against Medvedev. It'd be fantastic to see him go up against the world number 2 at this stage and the US Open champion. I think it'd be a really good demonstration and gauge as to where he is at the moment in terms of his tennis, Duckworth.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's see how James goes in that match. Alexei Popyrin has got Mia Kekmanovic, of course, who leads that head-to-head 2-0. Both those matches were on hard courts on the east coast of the US in the lead up to the US Open. A couple of straight set matches, but there's been a couple of tiebreakers in that as well. Alexei, I mean, he started beautifully, had the run of outs. He sort of got some form back. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride this year, as he has obviously just been very keen to cement that spot. I mean, he was outside the top 100 at the start of the year, got inside all the way to 60, and just been trying to hold that ground in what is a pretty tough tour.
Exceptionally competitive tour. If you've got talents like Popyrin at 60, 70 trying to hold ground, and even looking at someone like Kokonakis, who's 180 in the world and playing playing very solid sound tennis and edge again. Look, it surprises me having watched I suppose a little bit of both players. I think the one thing with Popyrin is that we know he performs well on the biggest stages, and this is one of the biggest stages on the tour. He's demonstrated time and again that he can rise to the occasion. Hopefully this is an occasion that suits him. I can't see why it wouldn't suit him playing there. I think he's certainly someone capable of reveling in those conditions. I'd like to see him win that one, and I think his second round, if he was able to get through, would be against Hurkacz. Is that right?
Hurkacz, yeah, correct.
So I mean, it's again, it's a big opportunity for the Australians. Tough first round matches, tough second round matches. Alexei, again, someone who I think we would love to see him get in the run here.
No doubt. So let's have a look at the Aussies. We know who the big names are: Medvedev, Tsitsipas, Zverev, Rublev, Berrettini, and we'll talk about Casper Root in just a moment. But if we're looking down at that quartet, they've all got, once they get past the first round bye, all got certainly very winnable second round matches. It'll be interesting if Jensen Brooksby gets through, which he probably should in the first round. The young American who I think we've all taken a bit of a liking to. He's a little bit different. We like players at a point of difference, and a matchup with Alexander Zverev, which would be great to see.
Absolutely. And back in California, where I know he hails from up in Sacramento, I think, as opposed to down in Palm Springs, but certainly showed himself more than capable through the US summer of competing against the big guys. That first set against Djokovic in particular was spectacular in New York. It's a fascinating Indian Wells, Brett, in terms of, we talked about the women that were out yesterday, but I think it's the first time since 2000 that we are without the big three, without a Federer, a Nadal, or a Djokovic at Indian Wells. So that gives us a glimpse at what the future will be like. But the other fascinating thing about this is because we haven't had Indian Wells for 2 years, none of the top 8 seeds have actually performed that well at Indian Wells. I think Hurkacz is probably the best performed. I think he's played one Indian Wells and made it through to a quarter, I believe, or he certainly won 4 matches. But Medvedev's, when he was last at Indian Wells, I think he was about 17 or 18 in the world, and his record's 3-3. I think having a look, Zverev's 5-4, so it's not necessarily a great run of excellence there. Rublev 1-2, Berrettini 0-2, Rude debut. Then Felix Auger-Aliassime is 3-2. So that's the top 8 seeds. None of them have done that well at Indian Wells. So I think on form, you think Medvedev is playing exceptionally well. And we know that Zverev's a genuine top liner, and the other guys are all very, very capable. But you could argue it's a very open tournament.
absolutely open. You mentioned one name there, Casper Root. I mean, he's had a terrific year, the most titles of anyone on the ATP Tour with 5. Saluted first on a hard court in San Diego last weekend. He'd won all his previous tournaments on clay. So he's putting together a great resume. He shot pretty quickly and maybe caught us just a little off guard. You look at the rankings, wow, Casper Root is now inside the top 10. But now the next challenge of trying to step up at these bigger events, the 500s, the Masters 1000s, the Grand Slams. We know that gap between 10 and 1 can be quite significant in a lot of ways. How do you see him tracking at the moment, and what do you think maybe his ceiling is?
Well, I remember a couple of years ago when Nick Kyrgios described him